welcome everybody to an introduction to grant readiness. Right? Are you ready to apply for grants? I think most people on the call probably hope that they are, and a lot of you probably have already. That's one of the best ways to know if you're ready for a grant is if somebody gives you one. But until then, right, hard to tell. We're going to do our best to go over some things, legal and structural requirements, and some other things to think about. Talk about how Unfunded List, the organization that I founded and Margaret is the board chair of, talk a little bit about how we can help thanks to our partnership with Kujalink. Margaret, do you have anything to add to that before we introduce ourselves further?
No, just welcome. And definitely, if you need anything clarified, just stick it in the chat and hopefully Claire can help us with any of those sort of things.
Okay. Look, there I am in a tuxedo, which I still own. It's in the closet over there. So I found a Unfunded List which required, amongst many other things, making sure that we were grant ready, and we are what's called a 501c3 organization, which makes us eligible for a number of grants that we have received. Margaret will talk about what that means a little bit more in a moment. Mostly, I am a fundraiser with individuals, what they call high net worth individuals, and also foundations, which meant a lot of grant writing and a lot of attending events and planning events and talking to wealthy people and talking to program officers, professionals at grant making organizations about how we were going to fund some programs together. I've also been in a position to give money away a few times, sometimes with my own family. We've given some grants. Also, I was on the board of something called the Slingshot Fund that reviewed many grant proposals every year. I was a reviewer for the 100 and Change program, which was a $100 million grant at the MacArthur Foundation. There they called us it was called the Wise Head Panel. So I am a wise head. I was also a reviewer for the Roddenberry Foundation, which Roddenberry is the guy who founded Star Trek. He created Star Trek. So I got to review proposals for them, which was a lot of fun. And a lot of other groups as well, some college groups and other things. At Unfunded List, we have received grants from the MacArthur Foundation, Kettering Philanthropies, and the UN Foundation, and others, and some smaller family foundations, some things like that. And I'm the host of the Open Door Philanthropy podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts. I interview philanthropists there, including a lot of folks who are grant makers, and we've talked about grant readiness on the show quite a few times. Much more impressive is our board chair, Margaret Chapman. There she is.
Hello. Hi. It's fun. That's a picture from our last in-person event pre-COVID, where, and I should have shared because it was a very.
Sorry, is that?
That's. I don't think that's. Okay.
It's gone now.
Oh, good. Excellent. Where we were having a panel on you don't have to be a founder. So how to have impact without having to create something new from scratch and be a founder. So my background is mostly in finance with some fundraising. I've managed budgets from organizations even smaller than Unfunded List, actually, all the way up to some of the largest ones with like Pew Charitable Trusts that have assets in the billions of dollars. I have my own LLC, and I'm also a partner in what we call Jam Strategies. I have a business partner, and we do strategic planning consulting. I've been the board chair and have been working with Unfunded List, like I said, from 2016. Initially, it was literally just copying and pasting all of the feedback into Canva to send the reports out. Now that is done by.
Thank you again for your service.
I'm very grateful that is done by someone else, in the internets now, and I can just focus on talking to the people after each round about their proposals and helping them think about next steps and how to be more grant ready, one might say. So, yeah.
One of the most critical steps of grant is structural, and it is. Sorry, people are trying to join.
Yep. There we go.
As we know, I'm a bad multitasker.
Multitasker. It's not good at that.
It's possible to get a grant without a 501c3,
It's true.
but it is where, but a lot of organizations require it, and not that difficult to get. You fill out some paperwork, and there you go. We did it. Margaret and I did it. And I'm sure a lot of, so hopefully folks on the call are, this is old hat to them, but for everybody else, Margaret, why don't you go over some of the basics?
Sure. So you've probably heard a lot of different ideas about nonprofits, about C3s, C4s, all the different acronyms that could come with having an entity that is fundraising. The C3 is the most popular and the most common for having some sort of nonprofit organization. Um, it's considered a legal public charity in the legal sense, right? So you are helping the public good. And because you are supporting the public good, um, you can get by with, not having to pay a lot of taxes. You do have to pay income tax for employees, but you do get a lot of tax exemptions. Also, donations made to you are tax deductible from the people who make the donations. Um, in response,
We should mention very quickly we are talking about, this is a legal structure in the United States.
exactly.
There are many other countries have structures that are very similar.
Yeah.
Very relevant to this conversation is if you want to receive grants from funders in the U.S., you will need to have this status, and that you do not. I don't believe you need to be physically in the U.S. to have this. Yeah, there's some sort of.
Yeah, you normally have to have.
That'll be pretty relevant for the folks. So
Yeah, you do normally have to have some sort of registered agent in the US. So some address somewhere in the US where you can receive mail that is relevant to your organization. So there are organizations that will do this for you. I mean, even OpenGov hubs and WeWorks will sometimes be an address for you to receive mail.
And it can be only for fun. You don't have to do programs there, right? It can be literally only for your funder. It can be the fundraising arm of the group.
It's
Has this mailbox to receive the checks when they come in.
It's true. Unfunded list was that for a short period of time in DC.
Yes.
Yeah. So, there are no shareholders. And the one big thing about a nonprofit C3 than other organizations, there's no lobbying or a very small amount of lobbying. So you cannot try and influence policy, on the political side. And you can't really support any individual's private benefit. So I can't start the Margaret Chapman Fund and raise money to send me on a lavish vacation, as much as I would like to do that. And in return for that, you do file a 990, which is just a form every year that says, here's how much we raised, here's how much we spent, and we promise that we have passed what we call the public support test, saying that 33% of our donations have come from individuals, more than 33%. Just saying that the public supports us. We do good things for the public supports us in return.
We are currently working our own 990. It is due next month.
That is true. It's a super fun document. If no
Even though we don't pay, we're filing a document with the IRS.
Right.
But we do not pay taxes. Is that correct?
That is correct. You will pay, you pay some taxes, but the biggest taxes anyone will pay are income taxes. If you have employees, you still have to pay those, even if you're a nonprofit. But you don't pay like federal taxes. If you sell a T-shirt, to raise money, you're not paying taxes on the money that someone paid you to buy that T-shirt.
And also, like places like hospitals and universities can own property and not pay property taxes.
Right.
Huge benefit for them. And the last benefit is that the donations to you are tax deductible, which is why this is an important step towards grant readiness. Because what's good is this is not just for grant readiness, but also allows you to accept donations from any U.S. citizen, and then they can write it. So if they donate $100 to a 501c3, they can take $100 off of their tax bill at the end of the year. That's one of the many reasons why Americans donate so much money every year. particularly through site. And there's other ways to get through this without having your own 501c3, which is our next slide.
Yeah.
You may have heard of fiscal sponsorship. What is
Yeah.
fiscal sponsorship, Margaret?
Oh, fiscal sponsorship is an arrangement with an organization that already has its 501c3 that allows you to essentially piggyback, if that's a phrase that is well known, to
Yeah,
piggyback
what is
onto.
that? Yeah, I guess. What is piggyback in Spanish? I'm very curious. You must do that, right?
Right? Do you like
You know what
right?
we're talking about when you
No? To um to
Caballito. It would be like tiny horse.
I was trying,
Tiny horse?
exactly. Estaba pensando en una traducción que no fuera solo local. Como, I mean, we do have translations, but they don't apply for every Latin American country. So
Sure,
each one should have their own. And I was thinking if I had any expression that was like universal for all Spanish speakers, and it's not coming.
Okay.
¿Cómo sería? No sé.
Tiny horse. So we're gonna tiny horse it though. I like that.
Sí.
I mean, right. So they're bringing you along, right? So you have you don't have a C3. They do have a C3. They're allowing you to use their C3 so that you can do some fundraising and some work in the United States or wherever you want to do some work. Often you might do this if you are out of the country and you do want to do some fundraising, but you don't want to go through the process of setting up a C3 in the United States. You may do it if you're just starting out and you're kind of testing to see if this idea is going to go, if people will follow through with it, if it's a good idea. So you might be fiscally sponsored so that you can go out and try and raise a little bit of money before you take the plunge, so to speak, in getting your C3. Oftentimes it will come with some additional services. So not only do you get the benefit of the C3, but sometimes they will help you with providing marketing, fundraising, finance is the big one because you're really using their financial services when you do this. And essentially you are put on their 990. So they have to file that form every year and you get rolled into their own 990. It allows you, like I said, to accept donations, to apply for grants, and to get on some of their insurances and do some of that back end stuff that is harder if you don't have your own C3. The one downside is that they do usually charge for this. So while you do get all these benefits, it's probably not something you want to do forever, just because it can get quite expensive. Because they do take a percentage usually of all the money you raise, plus some just general administrative fees, even if you're not raising a lot of funds.
On average, it's about 5 to 10%. Anything higher than 10%, you should come with a lot of services.
Yeah,
and is kind of suspect. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So there's a couple options here.
Yeah.
Probably some creative ways to figure out other ways. And you can get a grant without having this structure, like it has happened, and particularly if it's from an individual or something. But there's many programs that will require you to have one of these solutions before you even apply, right? But there are, I imagine, some other aspects to. Oh, yes, we can clarify this really quickly for us, Margaret.
So this is one thing I noticed the slide was further down, but both of the structures we just talked about, so having your own C3 or being fiscally sponsored, those all refer to your legal structure. And this goes around with how are you taxed? What kind of reports do you have to do? Kind of what is all that very formal talk about having your organization. The other model is a business model. And this is really how do you raise money? So you could have a legal entity that is a C3 and you can sell things, right? So your business model may be, I'm going to go and sell t-shirts, but my legal model is I'm a nonprofit 501c3. There's a whole list and you can go online. We can link to the longer talk about this because there's a very long list of all the ways that you can mesh these, so you can merge these two, where you can have a legal structure that is, very formal and very for-profit, and you can still get grants, and vice versa with the having a nonprofit and selling things. It's just something that we like to make super clear.
Yes.
Because people often do put those two together and think that if you're a nonprofit, you can't sell anything or make money, or if you're a for-profit, you can never get grants or accept donations.
That is correct. The only thing with a 501c3, the main thing you cannot do is reward any of your investors. That's
Correct.
I think that's the key difference. The key downside probably to like long-term profits, right? Is that you literally cannot do it. It's a not for profit. Right? Everybody can get paid there though.
Yes.
And including your contractors and interns and everybody who works for you can be paid well. Grant makers are particularly a lot of your larger grant makers now are requiring 501c3s or at least fiscal sponsorship. Do we have, I saw possibly some questions in Spanish in the chat. I think we might pause now so that there are any questions before we have a list of questions to go over, like sort of a grant readiness checklist on the next slide. Were there any questions, or is this folks introducing themselves?
There's only one question from Fabiola that says that she's in Mexico, and she says, "Are you looking for local partners?" But I don't know if she's referring to you or to the people that you were talking about before, like as something general. So I'm not sure. Fabiola, cuando preguntaste eso en el chat, ¿te referís a la gente de Unfunded List o te estabas refiriendo a algo más concreto?
Lo que pasa que en muchas ocasiones hay organizaciones de Alemania y de otros países que al igual se dedican a dar fondos a las ONGs, y en este caso que estoy en Tapachula, principalmente la frontera con Guatemala, me comentan que buscan un socio local. Ahora, en base a los proyectos, traté de inscribirme o registrarme en la página y me piden que yo haga la traducción en inglés. O sea, tengo un proyecto ya desarrollado en el tema de violencia de género con mujeres que han sido víctimas de las maras salvatruchas en Centroamérica. Entonces, es lo que yo ando buscando, ya sea una aprobación del proyecto, pero en este caso me piden nada más un proyecto. Entonces, no sé si puedo aplicar en 2 o envío mi proyecto, fondean el proyecto o hacen una sociedad local.
No, en realidad lo que pasa es que vos todavía no subiste tu proyecto para Unfunded List, ¿correcto? O sea, para esto que estamos haciendo ahora, vos simplemente tenés un proyecto. Bien, entonces, en realidad el servicio que ellos dan no es que vos aplicás y ellos te van a dar un fondo, sino lo que ellos hacen es, vos podés traducir como puedas el proyecto, si querés lo haces con Google Translate y después le pedís a alguien que te lo verifique un poco para ver que está como todo bastante bien, y ahí ya lo podés subir. Y lo que hace este equipo es chequeártelo y asegurarse de que está listo para ser financiado, te pueden recomendar a qué financiadores puedes aplicar, te pueden recomendar mejoras en el caso de que se den cuenta de que hay cosas que no están completas o no se termina de entender lo que querés decir o te falta contexto sobre la realidad en la que se insertaría tu proyecto. Pero no es como que ellos te van a dar los fondos, sino que lo que ellos hacen es
son grant writers.
O sea, mejorar, son grant writers y también son como grant reviewers. Específicamente, o sea, lo dejan fuerte para que cuando apliques tengas muchas más chances de ganar.
Ok, y entonces hay un pago por eso, por sus servicios.
No.
Okay.
No, sí, o sea, en este momento, ellos cobran por su lado, pero en este momento lo que hicimos es con las organizaciones que son miembros de Unfunded List, perdón, de Cuya Link, es gratis hasta un número de 75 organizaciones. Entonces, bueno, se convendría después de esto subirlo.
Perdón, y cuando ellos cobran, obtienen el fondo, ¿ellos cobran una comisión?
No.
No, es que así es en México.
No, o sea, ellos te lo van a, sorry, I will translate in a second. Ellos te van a revisar o sea, 12 reviewers van a revisar todo tu proyecto, te envían después una cosa escrita por la que vos podés hacer los cambios tú, o sea, no te lo entregan otra vez perfecto. Te van a dar todo lo que vos tendrías que cambiar, que puede ser hasta 100 páginas de review, puede ser larguísimo, y una reunión uno a uno para que vos les hagas todas las preguntas que te queden. Eso va a ser el 15 de noviembre, y vos con eso podés presentarlo a distintos financiadores. Si ganás, eso es tuyo, o sea, el servicio termina ahí y no quedas vinculada. No es vinculante, ¿sí?
Ok, me quedó claro, gracias.
Okay. The questions were merely about, and I could reply them all, so you're all set now. But it was about like if she would apply and you would help her. She's working with gender violence specifically. So if and she was trying to apply to some funders, and she didn't know if with your feedback, if after that she receives a fund, if she should give you a percentage of the fund, for example, things like that. There were questions regarding that.
Sure.
There were more questions, but they were all around that.
So other folks would do that, probably.
Yeah, she knows because she had that experience. That's why she was asking.
We do not know. We will review your proposal for free, and if you get a grant, please tell us. That's probably why a lot of folks don't ever tell us. They think I want a commission.
Ok, si en algún momento ganás un fondo, ellos quieren saber, pero no te van a cobrar. O sea, les interesa saber para ver cómo le va a la gente, pero ellos tienen la sospecha de que muchas veces las organizaciones que les va bien no les cuentan por miedo a que ellos les cobren una parte, pero eso no sucede.
So yeah, that's an important question. We're going to talk a little bit more about it in a few slides.
Después van a hablar más de esto, ¿no?
But for now, Margaret and I, over the weekend, came up with this little checklist. There are some other grant-ready checklists on the internet that are pretty good. If you Google, like, for information about that sort of thing. But we've reviewed a lot of proposals here. I've read 1,051 proposals since 2015 through just unfunded list, and several hundred through some other programs. And like I said, it all depends on the funder, right? So if I'm giving money away, I decide how to give it away, right? And I might decide to give it to groups that don't have any legal status in faraway countries and hope that they will spend it correctly. But probably I'm going to insist that they have the proper legal status, as is what the vast majority of funders do. And there are some instances, in fact, Marina, who's speaking tomorrow, is currently going through this, where a foundation wants to give her a grant to do a program, but she currently does not have a 501c3. So she needs to find a fiscal sponsor in order to receive the grant, which can happen, right? But she literally cannot cash the check from that foundation until she resolves the legal and organizational eligibility requirements. If it's a government grant maker, then those requirements are even stricter. I mean, because that's funding that's being given away because a law was passed, right? And generally those are government employees managing that program. Right, that's number one, like we were talking about above. You got to have that status stuff figured out. Once you've got that figured out, you've only got 7 more things to think about, right? Well, on your way, 12.5% on your way, I think.
Yeah, I'll say for the legal status, it's a hurdle for you, but it's also a checkbox for the funder as well, because often they will also have to meet various legal models on their end. So, while it may seem like, why can't they just give me money? It's because they're also trying to protect themselves, because if they give money, if they're their own 501c3 and they're giving out grants, they may lose their status if they give funding to an entity that isn't legally able to accept it. So just to clarify, it's not because they're trying to be hard or not wanting to give you funding. It's because they can't keep doing their work if they get in trouble for giving out money. So just something to think about on that side.
Particularly with private foundations, which is this is a little bit complicated. They're also 501c3s. It's but there's like more letters after the 3. So we are like, I think we're a 501c3
Yeah, there's
E9 maybe.
909 EIOU.
No one knows there's more letters after the C3.
True.
That's really all you need to know. And private foundations have requirements on them. The main one to be aware of, right? So they're allowed to take their money and invest it with significant tax advantage, right? So they can and they can buy stocks and bonds and things and invest that money as it's held by the foundation, and they can make a return on those investments. And in exchange for the tax advantage, they have to give away 5% of the total endowment every year. The 5% is the minimum that they have to give away. They're required to. If they don't give that much money away, they will lose their status as a private foundation and have to pay higher taxes on their investments. They also, once it's in the foundation's hold, they can't inure to anyone's benefits. They can't remove the money and go on vacation or buy a yacht or anything. It can only be used for grant making. But the point is that they can set up a foundation, give 5% away every year, make more than that off the principal, and give grants year after year after year and support nonprofits in their community. This is how many hospitals and universities and community centers and libraries and parks and other wonderful programs are supported because large funds like this exist. And increasingly, there are professionals that work there who make sure that everything is correct. And that 5% has to go to 501c3 organizations. They can give to whoever they want, but at least 5% of it has to go to 501c3s. So the next one's a lot more fun and program oriented, right? So do you have, and this is something that we're pretty good at, we can be very helpful with. So do you have clear, defined language about your program? Do you have a mission statement that makes sense to folks? Sometimes, and I've seen this many times, you think your mission statement makes sense. And it might even make sense to everybody you talk to about your program. But if you show it to people who aren't in your world, it won't make any sense to them. And then sometimes you're applying to funds where there's a lot of knowledge base and they will know a lot about your issue. You can talk at a very high level. Other times you'll be talking to a family foundation who's just trying to do good in the world, right? And you'll need to probably try to speak more broadly. Beyond just your mission statement, can you describe your program in one paragraph, in 2 paragraphs, in 500 words? Can you do it in 200 characters? Can you do it in 1,100 characters? Right. This is what because every grant you go after is going to ask questions slightly differently with slightly different character limits for answers. You need to be prepared to answer a variety of questions at a variety of lengths and with using very strong, crisp, concise language each time. Right. And doing all that can be helpful for other aspects of your program, right? No reason you can't use your grant language on your website or in your newsletters or another program you work on. Another thing that funders really look for, and that I'm fortunate to have the chair of my board of directors here. Right. And I think anyone who's ever given us a grant was probably nervous about me, right? But then they noticed that Margaret was here and they feel a lot more comfortable about it, right? Because one, Margaret has managed very large budgets, received large grants at other organizations, right? And is quite capable. We have several other impressive board members as well who have relevant experience in the field. We have a policy here that we always have at least one person on the board who is someone whose proposals we review. So currently, one of our board members is Sarah McIntosh, who is a proposal author in Washington, D.C. She writes proposals for a community health center there and submits them every round, and we give her feedback, and she says that it improves her work. And she serves on our board of directors. We've historically had several other folks who are reviewed by us, right? And it's important part of what Margaret was talking about earlier, the public support test, right? The people that we are providing our services to are involved in the management of the organization. This is something that increasingly a lot of funders are looking forward. And legally, if you are a 501c3, you have to have a board of directors. It's just a part of the above legal status thing. But it can also be a very useful add-on to your organization. Their primary responsibility should be fundraising. So people who can help raise money for your organization, have them join your board, use their credibility and their time, talent, and treasure. The terminology that like one of my first bosses used to use. So you don't just want them to give money.
Was he
You
missing?
gotta get their time and their abilities as well. And then this one is tough. So a lot of folks may come into it thinking, well, I'll get the grant first, and then I'll be able to do the work, right? And that makes sense. Like I can see why you thought it out that way. And that can work if you are already a like established organization that has a track record of doing a bunch of other things. You want to launch a new program, you need the grant first to go after it. But you have that track record that they can look at, right? Like I think you need this, and this it can be tough. Like you got to self-evaluate here a little bit, right? Like, are you involved enough in this issue and in the community that you are helping in a way that, right, giving you money will amplify the assistance you're providing, right? It's great to be aspirational, right? I would like to help, but I just need this money is generally not a winning pitch.
And I would say for this one too, looking at who are the other players in the field, where are the other people, what are they doing, and really ensuring that if you're writing your grant, you're focusing on how you're different, how you stand out, how you do it better. What is your niche? What is the thing you add that they don't? And to the panel I did on you don't have to be a founder. Is there someone already doing the work, right? Is there someone who you already have one program you want to expand? Is someone else already in that space and you can partner with them and work with them on that project as well?
Yes, very good. And then so this one we could probably do a whole, and people have done a whole sessions on, right? How do you measure your outcomes? I will concede it's important. It's like personally not a like favorite of mine, but so funder might have a goal of saying, and like their goals might be very specific or perhaps tied to the SDGs, right? And generally there's a low flying plane overhead. Excuse me. There he goes. Right, might have very specific numbers based goals, so-called SMART goals. One thing I read from evaluators and reports all the time is that they wanted the proposal explained using SMART goals, which I don't. Well, the acronym won't translate to other language, but what are they?
Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-based.
Right. Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome. I will say this is my least. Thank you, David. This is my least favorite question on almost every grant because I like getting the work done, and so I'm not in a monitoring and evaluation expert, and I can put some numbers to things. For unfunded list, we might say, in this round, we're going to review 100 proposals. And that is our outcome that we're hoping to achieve. There are any number of things that could happen that could stop us from achieving that outcome. I think being honest with funders here is super important because you may have goals and you state them, but then also being honest to what the challenges might be to you achieving those goals, and to the idea of making them smart. Well, are they realistic is kind of one of the biggest ones. We want to review 1,000 proposals this round. Well, that's not super realistic. Maybe 100 is more realistic.
Mm-hmm. Or also, I think in particular that you have a narrow set of outcomes.
Exactly.
I think one thing that is generally unfundable is if you're like, we see this sometimes, proposals that cover nearly every issue. Like we are the local NGO and we're working on health, education, climate change, workforce development, youth development, and the refugee crisis. Right? Like how is a funder supposed to measure the success of giving? Like it's great that you're covering all those needs, but it's like how they can't track what's happening to something that broad. And generally funders will be funding on a very specific issue. The other thing that you should do, right? Like I recently applied to a number of, like on 4 unfunded list, I applied to a number of corporate foundations, and also like updated our profile on GuideStar and filled out some other long forms with questions and answers on our behalf. And like this year was particularly notable that there are a lot of checklists and like measurable tracking questions, right? And also a lot of identity-based questions. So going back to the earlier question about your board of directors, like I applied to PNC Foundation, which is a fairly broad funder that funds lots of different things because it's a huge bank. And they asked several pages of questions about the background of my board members, whether they were like LGBTQ or like or BIPOC or what they're like, several pages of those questions. Same with GuideStar, which is a site that like reviews nonprofits for funders, and a couple others. Less so. I mean, we had some of those questions from private foundations. In fact, while we were being funded by the MacArthur Foundation, they sent out like a very lengthy survey along those same lines. And in particular, with me, one thing that's difficult is they want to know the identities of folks who submit proposals, right? So they want to know like how. Like, I've been asked what percentage of the proposal authors are LGBTQ, identify that way, and I'm like, I don't ask them that when they send me their proposals to be reviewed. It's not like particularly important. Obviously, sometimes it comes up, like, and it's pretty obvious, but like, it's not an outcome that I would like to be measuring, but it is something that funders are asking. And I've said that it's not really a good culture fit for us, and I generally don't apply for things like that at the moment because I don't think I'm what they're looking for. What you really want to look at in terms of like, am I going to get this grant, is your natural way of measuring your success match up with what this funder says they're trying to achieve? Because if you're trying to, right, put a square box in a round hole, I imagine there's a Spanish translation for that. Square peg in a round hole.
I don't even know the expressions in English. Yeah.
So, the peg doesn't fit. You can't. It doesn't work.
You're trying to make something fit that doesn't.
Trying to put the wrong shape.
Right.
Trying to put a square in a circle.
I'm trying to put a square in a circle and it doesn't fit.
No, I understand the concept now, but I don't know if we have an expression. Si alguien sabe alguna expresión, lo puede decir. Pero bueno, simplemente es que no encaja lo que están tratando de decir, ¿no?
Yeah,
I just literally translated it, but I don't know if we have an expression.
Thank you.
I'm just getting my props out here. It's fine. We do theater.
I'm glad we got Margaret. We were recording for Margaret's visual there. Sorry for any confusion there, but the key point, and this is very important, you want to make sure that you fit with what the funder is looking for, which goes to our next point, right? Have you researched and hopefully reached out to your potential funding targets? A lot of the stuff that we review historically is what I would call cold episodic submissions.
Yep.
So they don't have this is like they're a one-time thing to try to get a grant from a foundation that they have absolutely no relationship with. You don't know any of the people who are there, and that can happen. Like they might give grants to you if your proposal is the best and it gets through all of the process. But it's much more likely to get grants if you have a like grant program, you've been receiving other grants, you're really set up for it, and you have a relationship with the grant manager. When we got the biggest grant we've ever gotten was from the MacArthur Foundation, and the program officer helped me write the proposal. He read a few drafts before we officially submitted it because he really wanted to make sure it went forward. And right, many times that is the proposal is important. It needs to be written and it needs to be written well, which is why he was helping me do it. But like the relationship was even more important there. He knew that we were a useful actor in the field. He knew that we had a good, strong board of directors, that he knew we had all of our legal documents in place. And he knew all of that other stuff already because of the relationship he had with the organization. And that sort of fast-tracked us along. Ultimately, we're not funded by MacArthur Foundation anymore. And I think that's mostly because the way that we measure our outcomes doesn't really line up with what they're trying to achieve in the funding space, which is okay. There are many funders in the world. There's over 100,000 different private foundations. We are a pretty good fit for our current largest funder, which is Kettering Philanthropies, who are just sort of generally interested in being able to fund a wider range of programs, which means they want to be able to read more proposals from like a wider range of groups, and they like what we're doing. It can be very difficult to establish relationships with funders, right? Some of them deliberately make it hard to contact them. But if you stay at it for a long time, you're a useful actor in the field. Generally, it happens. We were doing a session at the U.S. Institute of Peace talking about how to review grant proposals. And someone from the MacArthur Foundation came to that session and enjoyed what he saw, followed up over email, and over the course of a couple of years, ended up getting a grant there. And then this is number 7. Margaret insisted I add to the list.
Yes. This is I background in finance. I love systems, and I think that actually, you can have everything else perfect, but you really need to look at your own internal structure before you go after certain types of funding. And I can give you an example as to why. I worked for one of the largest organizations, especially in the DC area. They had hundreds of millions of dollars in assets, staff of 800, whole finance teams working for each project that they had under their belt. And they refused to go after federal funding. They had one grant that I worked on while I was there. That was their entry point, their federal-like funding, but they knew that they did not have the systems in place to accept and manage a grant that required all of the stuff that a federal grant would require, right? They just knew they couldn't do it. That was not something that was a good fit for them. Switched to another group that I went to a couple of years later. They had 5 staff, about a $2 million budget, and they only accepted federal funding. They built their systems from the beginning because they knew that their most likely funder was going to be the government. They were going to get funds from NASA, from DOD, from all of these funders who wanted to fund in that space. They were working on those types of projects. So they built their systems to accept and manage those types of funds. So this one is really important to me because you can get an amazing grant, and then you look at the requirements after you receive the funding, and all of a sudden you have to submit monthly invoices. You have to submit very super detailed reports at the end of the period. You have all of these things that are now required of you, and you don't have the systems ready for that. So when you're looking at funders, kind of figure out what their requirements are on the other end to make sure that if you do get the funding, that you can actually accept it, manage it, and not feel overwhelmed, that you can still do the important program that you want to run. That's very important to me. Clearly, I get very excited by this one.
Yes. And we remember one time we talked about applying to some sort of federal grant and ultimately said no, because we would not have been able to manage it. Yep. This last one here is another one that we can be particularly helpful with. It can be hard for you to know if your proposal leaves unanswered questions, right? Because you may think you answered them all, but someone else reads it, thinks other things. And I will say that depending on the program you apply to, any one of these 8 points could be the thing that makes or breaks a grant proposal, right? You might answer all of the questions, have all the sufficient systems, have a good, strong relationship with them, measure your outcomes well, be an incredible, celebrity in the field with a strong board and really great language. You don't have a C3, you can't cash the check, right? And then any one of those other things could make it or break it for you. And unfortunately, you might not know which of these things is your weak spot. You write a grant proposal, especially something that you spend a very long time writing and you've been polishing for a while near the end, and it's very hard for you to look at that with fresh eyes, right? Which is what we do at Unfunded List. And we take your proposal, we have it read by a number of folks, right? So I try to get it read by people with different perspectives. One of the reasons I like working with Margaret is she's done different things in her career than I have. Well, she always has different ideas and perspectives than I do, which is very useful. It will be a diverse group of folks who read your proposal. Some of them will have a finance background and they'll be very concerned with like how you're answering your financial questions or your budget. Others will have more of a program outcome, like we have some monitoring and evaluation folks who will want to know like how are you measuring, like what they'll be talking about SMART goals in the report. Right, as we were talking about earlier, like there's no, right, thanks to the Kujulink partnership, if you're on the platform, we'll review proposals for you. There's no cost. I don't want commission from you afterwards. Right, we know that projects are improved by having the proposals reviewed. We have a very large number of reviewers signed up, hundreds and hundreds of reviewers with lots of experience. We've been doing this for a while. Here are some brief testimonials. I will not read them all out loud. The bottom two are from folks who submitted proposals to us and had their proposals reviewed. And I've also included a quote from Matthew there. At the Elevate Prize, we've previously done a partnership like the one with Kujulink with several other groups, including the Elevate Prize. They give away hundreds of thousands of dollars in grants every year, maybe millions. You might want, several of the folks on the call might want to look into them, right? It's the Elevate Prize. I don't know their website, but if you Google it or search for it, I'm sure you'll find it. We reviewed their applicants' proposals independently, gave them all feedback so they could use that feedback in their additional applications. We've also done this with a program called Solve at MIT, right? That's the quote in the bottom right there. Does anybody have any questions about grant readiness or Unfunded List for Margaret and I?
¿Alguien tiene preguntas? Sí. ¿Quién está de cultura de trabajo acá?
Hola, Luna.
Luna. ¿La querés hacer en inglés?
Sí, la hago en inglés.
Super.
Hi, Margaret and Dave. First, I wanted to thank you for your time. I have two questions. One is more of what kind of project we can submit. The most updated project I have written in English, we're from Argentina, so it's not every day that we write proposals in English. It's more based in a questionnaire, so I don't know if I could possibly upload it, maybe be extended a little bit. It had a very short word limit. Stop me if you don't understand something.
No, I understand.
And then I have a second question that's kind of related to this. Apart from proposals, from your experience, apart from proposals that have a very specific like length incorporated or defined by the grant maker, is there an average length we should work towards?
Yeah, so excellent questions. There, like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of different grant makers and a lot of different proposal formats. And one of the things we've endeavored to do from the beginning is be able to review whatever it is you're working on. There are some limitations to that, though. So if you have a 100-page proposal, you can send it to me and we'll get it reviewed. Like I have some reviewers who really like doing this and will probably read that. But most of them will say, no, this is too long. I'm a volunteer. No, this is too long. And I'm okay with that with our program because that's what, if you try to like, that's most reviewers don't like, the actual grant makers don't want to read that much either. Right. So this is useful feedback that not that many people wanted to read your very long proposal, right? On the flip side, sometimes people have like a one-pager or something that was very short, very, very short. And we can review that as well. We'll give you feedback on that. we will definitely have a lot of unanswered questions because it's really hard to like answer all of my reviewers' questions in one page. And if you do it, that's all. It would be amazing. But generally, those reports are, and both reports will be useful. But if you send something that's more like 5 to 7 pages, that is thorough enough to answer all the questions, right? And something that someone can sit down and read pretty quickly in one sitting and fill out their form, right? Then you're going to get a lot of responses. Sometimes we get up to we get over 20 different reviews on proposals. Those are generally like the ones that are the easiest to follow. They're not like too complicated or something. And they're like a nice length. And in general, like I've noticed they will look at how long it is before they decide if they're going to read it or not. It's like the first thing. It's the first thing that many of them look at. But yeah, I would say 5 to 7 pages of it. Formatting wise, right? You can submit it in whatever format you've got, right? I don't want to make a lot of new work for you. So people do it a variety of ways. Sometimes, and I recommend doing this, you should write a draft of all the answers in like a Word document before you submit it, right? So you can polish the draft there. If you want to submit that draft to us, that's fine. People do that. That's great. Sometimes, though, the funder might give you the option to like download your application and you have the whole thing, and we can even see the exact wording of the funder's questions and everything. Sometimes that can be kind of helpful for us to be able to see that as well. But they can be a little bit ugly at times. But I would just say in general, we're set up to be able to review whatever you got. We're going to do our best to review whatever you've got. But the prettier it looks, and the more in the sweet spot of 5 to 7 pages it is, the more review. I might be able to put dozens of reviewers on it instead of just a handful.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? We also have a Q&A later this week in Spanish. My Alex Barrio, who's from Colombia and has been a reviewer with us for a long time, will be doing a Q&A in Spanish on Wednesday. And we are going to talk a little bit about cross-cultural application tomorrow with our evaluators, Marina and Abby. I used to work with Abby in a place called Atlas Corps, and she raised a lot of money from a lot of different funders in both English and Spanish. So she wrote grant proposals in English. She got some funding from the government of Colombia for some programs that she had to submit in Spanish. I think she's the only person I know personally who has written in both English and Spanish and won the proposals in both languages. And also Marina, who is Native American. She's a member of Pueblo in New Mexico and has applied for grants from the U.S. government for the Pueblo. And also I met her on a cultural exchange trip. I met her in Israel. So we'll have a lot to talk about tomorrow about applying across culturally. We can add a little bit more about our program in these sessions. Margaret and I notably do the report discussions at the end of the round. So in addition to having a proposal reviewed, you also get the opportunity to speak about the report you received, talk about how best to implement the next steps. And if the follow-ups are in, Margaret and I do the majority of the report discussions. If you're lucky, you get Margaret, and the rest of you will have to speak to me. I will do my best. A lot of what I say is just stuff I've heard Margaret say.
Not true. A lot of what I say is stuff I've heard Dave say. So it's really just a circle.
No, but we have access to some of the most knowledgeable folks in philanthropy on the reviewing committee. Hundreds, hopefully more. We're recruiting more reviewers each day. 2 folks have signed up to review during this session. I don't know, maybe it was people in the call or whatever. But we get applications every day. Very qualified people with a lot of experience sign up. They know how hard it is to write grants, how to get those things funded. I think they understand that it's increasingly hard if you are in another country, if you're in Argentina and you're trying to apply for funding from a grant maker in the US. That is very difficult. It's difficult for the grant maker in the US too, right? It's very easy to understand issues that are in your backyard that affect you personally. Those are easier decisions for them to make. If it's when the funding is very hard, far away, and the need is very great, it is harder to narrow down and make those decisions. We are excited to work with Googlink and Clara here to try to make some of these proposal submissions go a little bit more smoothly, give you access to some perspective and connections and some meaningful connections, as Googlink would say. Clara, do you have anything to add to
Yes, we have a question from Alejandra Shelapa. It says, do proposals have to be for a specific project, or they could be for the organization as a whole?
Either way is fine. And in fact, when you submit, we ask some specific questions about that. Like we ask, is this for a specific project or or general, whatever? Just make it clear, like what it is. Our reviewers know to expect anything, right? Most other programs, reviewers are reading the same thing, like it's the same format over and over again, right? So they go to the training and they learn how to like read that proposal and apply it to a matrix. Like ours is fundamentally much different than that. They know to expect the batch. They're going to get as a reviewer here, and you're all encouraged to review proposals with us, right? You will receive a small batch of 3 to 5 proposals to read, and you can in fact do it on your phone, at the computer in your spare time. It takes about an hour to read and review a proposal with us, right? All goes through our app, produces the reports that we make. I'm sure we can follow up with a bunch of links on how to join the committee, get your proposals submitted through Googlink. It was a pleasure speaking with you all. Particularly a pleasure to be with my partner, Margaret. Thank you as always for your time.
Of course, it's always fun when I
Find
get
your talent and your treasure.
it's a classic faith-based, trio there. I say it all the time. Your time, your talent, your treasure.
Do they say that at church? Time,
They do.
talent, treasure.
It's true. Yep.
You say it at temple as well.
See?
That's
Yes.
that is very interfaith.
Yep.
Fundraising, it actually is very good bridge builder. I recently wrote a piece up called Grant Proposals and Cultural Exchange. This is fundamentally it's like I said, it is difficult to fund in a faraway land, but it's also a great opportunity to learn about other cultures when you are funding other programs. I've been in that position as well. When I was at the 100 and Change program, I'm remembering now that I read a submission from the government of Mexico. Right? So this was $100 million grant program. So the folks who applied were like huge universities and governments. And this was to build a national arboretum of Mexico. I remember I learned a lot about like what kind of, I've never been to Mexico. So I learned a lot about like what kind of flowers and animals and stuff they have there from reading that proposal. And I scored it very highly, but unfortunately, it did not move forward. Yeah, there's that.
There it is.
There's a piece, Deborah. Are there other questions?
No questions?
That I want to be respectful of everyone's time.
Bueno, ya estamos terminando porque ya estamos pasados por un minuto, pero si alguien tiene preguntas, alguna pregunta más, podemos responder.
This has been super fun. I've learned a lot on the call. I learn a lot every day.
Every day is a school day.
Thank you so much, both of us and everyone that has attended. No, I just asked in Spanish if there were any further questions, and no one said anything, so I think we're all set. Thank you so much. It's been really interesting and very useful, and a lot of people asked for the recording of the session and also for the PDF presentation. So if you have it,
to you, Clara.
Okay.
Yep.
And then you can make it available to whomever you like.
Thanks so much.
Of course. Thank you guys.
Thank you all. Have a good rest of your day.
Yep.
Muchas gracias a todos los que participaron. Muchas gracias.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Someone is just now trying to join, which unfortunately.
Maybe just someone disconnected and then came back.
That's true.
All right. Anyway, thank you, Clara.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Margaret y Dave.
See you tomorrow. I'll follow up with this one and I'll send you the other one
I'll be here.
in advance.
I just arrived to Barcelona, so I'm like adapting in many ways. As you can see, I'm in summertime now. Yay!
You're in Barcelona, did you say?
Yeah, I used to live here.
But that's very far away from where you were.
I know, I flew for 17 hours. Oh my God.
Oh my
Okay. See you soon.
Cool.
See you tomorrow. But let's continue this by email. Bye. Thank you.
you.
Good to
Bye.
see everybody. Have a good rest of your day.